Well, good morning. My name's Andrea, and I'm reading from Genesis chapter 16 this morning. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave, and perhaps I can build a family through her." Abram agreed to what Sarai said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian slave Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar, and she conceived. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. Then Sarai said to Abram, "You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and now she knows she is pregnant. She despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me." "Your slave is in your hands," Abram said. "Do with her whatever you think best." Then Sarai mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, "Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going?" "I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai," she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, "Go back to your mistress and submit to her." The angel added, "I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count." The angel of the Lord said to her, "You are now pregnant, and you will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he will live in hostility towards all his brothers." She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her, "You are the God who sees me." For she said, "I have now seen the one who sees me." That is why the well was called Bir Lahairoi. It is still there between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave the name Ishmael to the son she had born. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. This is the word of the Lord. We're going to have Jenna come up, and I'll pray with her before she brings today's message. God, we thank you for this word, even though it is a little difficult actually to read. And I thank you for Jenna, who has been preparing for this and listening to you and what you would have to share with us. And so, Lord, I pray that you would speak through her this morning and that you would give us ears to hear. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Andrea. Well, good morning. I feel like I do know most of you, but as Andrea said, my name is Jenna. I have been a tender in Barcy for a long time, since I was about 1 year old. And more recently, I have been working here at the church, doing a variety of roles. More recently, I have been on maternity leave, though, spending my time with this little guy. I have been really enjoying my time being a mom and enjoying a different pace of life. But today we are continuing our sermon series on the names of God, and we'll be looking at the name El Roi, which means the God who sees me. Now I want to start today with a question. Have you ever felt unseen? I feel like this is kind of a rhetorical question because I feel like most people can identify some point in their life they have felt unseen, whether it be a friend, a coworker, a boss, a spouse, a child. It's easy to feel unseen. And I am no stranger to feeling unseen. I was a really quiet kid growing up. Some of you might remember that. And so I often kind of flew under the radar. My parents tell me this story about how when I was in kindergarten, I was in this class, and as part of the class setup, we had this rug. that kind of had each squares on it, and we had an assigned square on the rug to sit during story times or whatever we did. And I remember my assigned square was somewhere in the third or fourth row. But at some point during the year, my teacher decided to move me to the front row. And I'm not a teacher, but I feel like when you get moved to the front row, it's because you're a troublemaker, and the teacher needs to keep a closer eye on you. But that was not the case for me. My teacher told my parents she needed to move me to the front row because she would just forget that I was there if I wasn't right in front of her nose. And so in retrospect, I really appreciate this teacher for, recognizing that I was an easy to forget child because I didn't talk much, and doing something to help her remember me. Now, in this passage, we have this woman named Hagar, and she was a forgettable person by all accounts. But despite her being forgettable to all people around her, God encounters her. And in his encounter with her, she gives him this name, El Roi. Now, unlike some of the other names that we have looked at in this series, this name is actually only used once in Scripture, and it is in this story. It's not used in Hebrew or Greek or Aramaic anywhere else. And because of that, I want to spend just a little time in this story specifically, because I believe that it's in this story that we really see the beauty and meaning of this name. So let's take a look. Like all Bible stories, this story is actually part of a much bigger narrative. It's part of the book of Genesis. And the purpose of the book of Genesis is to tell the Israelites who have just come out of slavery in Egypt who they are, because they were just slaves. They had been stripped of their identity, so it was important that God tell them who they were as a people. He wanted to tell them who he was as their God. And then also the book of Genesis sets up themes that we see through the rest of the Bible and introduces God's plan for redemption for all of creation. And in Genesis 12, a little earlier on, we meet Abram and Sarai for the first time. And they are the mother and father of the people of Israel. So God's introducing, this is the people, this is who you are. And he calls them out of their country and gives them this blessing. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So God gives them this blessing. And then there are some stories that kind of happen between this text and our text. Abraham and Sarah go down to Egypt, which is likely where they acquired their slave Hagar. And then there's some stories with Lot, his nephew. And then in Genesis 15, verse 5, God speaks to Abraham again. And he reiterates his promise, saying, "Look up to the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them." Then he said to him, "So shall your offspring be." A beautiful promise, one that I think is familiar to a lot of us. And so this happens, and then we enter Genesis 16. So here we find Abraham and Sarah, and they are still childless. And Sarah would have borne the brunt of this anxiety because at the time it was believed that she was the one pretty much responsible for doing this. And so we saw in the text that it's been 10 years, and she's really old and doesn't have a child, but they've been told that they're going to have all these descendants. So in her anxiety, she decides to come up with her own plan and make God's promise happen for herself. So she decides to take her slave Hagar and give him to Abraham so that their descendants can be made through her, which was a relatively common practice in the day. But as with most things, when we try and take control of God's promises for ourselves, things begin to unravel. Hagar does conceive, she does get pregnant, but then she begins to lord this position over Sarah. And Sarah, as a result, mistreats Hagar. And we are not given details exactly what this mistreatment entails, but we know that it is bad enough that Hagar thought she was better off in the wilderness than with Sarah. And so Hagar runs to the wilderness and is left in this hopeless situation. Now I want to take a look at Hagar for a second and remind you that Hagar in this story is a nobody to all of the hearers of the story, the Israelites at the time, in her context as well. She was a slave. She was property. Some translations say maidservant. Some translations just say servant. It's a little unclear, but she, at the end of the day, was property for whatever reason of Abraham and Sarah, making her less than human. She was a woman, which in the time made also her value less than. She was a foreigner. She wasn't part of this original group of people that God promised to bless. And an important detail, she was an Egyptian. Now, if you remember, I said earlier, the Israelites had just come out of Egypt and were slaves to Egyptians. So the hearers of this story would have heard Egyptian and been like, oh yeah, those terrible people. So Hagar basically encompassed everything that was despised and hated and less than in society. And so here's this woman in the wilderness that probably looks like she's going to die. But then God appears. We see the verse, angel of the Lord. And this is like a bit of a tricky phrase. We don't know exactly what this means, but most scholars seem to agree that this means the physical presence of God. And this phrase is used multiple times through scriptures, but this is the first time it's used. And so God's physical presence appears to Hagar, by all accounts a nobody, not to Abraham and Sarah, though he does appear to them physically later. He appears to a slave, a foreigner, a woman, an Egyptian. And here he gives her a blessing. And this blessing is actually very similar to the blessing that we just read in Genesis 15. He says, I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count. Adrian, if you want to put, yeah, there we go. So this is very similar to this blessing that he gave Abraham. And so here's this woman that stands for nothing, or is like representative of someone that is a no one, and God blesses her. And so I think Hagar likely spent most of her life going unseen, but now she is being seen and blessed by the Most High. And it is from that place that she responds by giving God this name, El Roi, the God who sees me. And this speaks directly to who God is. And I think that there are two things that I think we can really take away from this name and this story. And number one, I think is the obvious one, is that God sees you. God sees you. When no one else saw Hagar, when no one else cared about Hagar, God did. And this isn't just some ancient story, because God sees you and he sees me. And as I said, I was a quiet kid. I've never been a slave, but I do know what it's like to feel unseen. Here, as I said, I grew up at this church, and when I was a kid, for a period of time, we had a kids choir that I was part of, and we were preparing these songs to sing in front of the congregation. And there were a few solos as part of one of the songs, and every once in a while I did want to be in the spotlight, and so I decided I wanted one of these solos. So I practiced, and I didn't get it, which is actually for the best in retrospect. Singing is not my strong suit, but I was a little disappointed. But one day we were practicing in here on this stage, and the person who was doing the solo was running late, and so I figured, if I can't do the solo in front of the church, this is at least my chance to do the solo. So I offered I'll do the solo while we wait for the other person to get here. And the choir director said, that's very nice, but actually, would you be able to go out in the foyer and direct people to where we're practicing? Because we normally practiced in the gym and we were practicing here. I don't know, I thought it was an odd request because you could clearly hear that we were in here, but whatever. I was a good, obedient kid. I went to the foyer, sat on the foyer stairs. A few people came in and I said, we're practicing in the sanctuary. And I just sat there, and I sat there, and I was just waiting for someone to come get me. And then suddenly all the kids that were in here run to the east wing, and they were getting water. and I was still sitting there because no one told me I was allowed to leave, and the choir director even went past the east wing, and I was still sitting there, and then everyone came back, and then the choir director, she came back through, and then she looked at me and she said, "Oh, Jenna, I forgot you were out here." And that crushed me, because not only was I not talented enough to get a solo, I was not even important enough to be remembered. And we as humans have been created in the image of God, but often we can get that mixed up and we start creating God in our image. The hurts and pains we feel from other humans, we start projecting onto God. And because I largely felt unseen in life, I began to believe that was true about God, that he didn't see me. But I am reminded in this story that God sees everybody. He sees the unseen. And I remember feeling that also here at this church just a couple years ago. So for those of you who were here a couple years ago, you remember Susan was about to retire, and us as a staff team were kind of figuring out how to cover some of the work that she did. We were figuring out how to shuffle roles, and as part of that, the leadership proposed to me that I could take on some of the work that Susan had did, and I was really excited about this. I had had the opportunity to do some of this with Susan, the liturgical year, some of the volunteer work, or work with volunteers, and this felt really exciting. This was more close to what I was trained to do. My degree is in theology, but because this was a transition year, it was only offered to me for, guaranteed for a year. And so that made it difficult, and I also at the time was working 2 jobs. I was working here, but then I was also teaching ESL in the Northeast to newcomers. And I did love that job, but because I was taking on more roles, I need to take on more hours, which meant that I have to give up my role teaching. And so I had this kind of big decision in front of me. I either could stay, do the status quo, keep my 2 jobs, keep working in the office, keep teaching, or I could give up my permanent teaching position to take on a temporary role, but a role that I was passionate about here. And I was really struggling, and I was praying, and I felt no clarity, no guidance from God. And I was frustrated. I felt like God wasn't listening to me, that he didn't care. And I was praying about a church job, and you'd think that God would give clarity on church jobs if no other jobs, but there I was, and I was sitting in the office, and I was so mad about it. I was so mad, and I said, God, you don't care about me, you don't see me. And I was just mad. But the day continued. I still had work to do. And Renus, in his role as a pastor, meets with various people. And someone came to meet with him, said hi to him. Him and Renus went out to a coffee shop. I also had some work that day that I had to do out of the office, maybe getting communion supplies or something, and so I also left. And when I came back, Renus had gotten back from his coffee and was in his office, and so I went to sit down at my desk. And on my desk, there was a brownie. And so Renus came out of his office and was like, "Oh, hey, this brownie is from this person that I had coffee with." While we were getting coffee, he said, this person said, "I feel like I need to get Jenna something." And they decided that a brownie was a good choice, and which it was. But in that moment, I felt like God said to me, "I do see you. I do see you. I do care about you." And that made all the difference. And God didn't tell me in that moment what to do, what decision to make. In the same way in our story, God actually calls Hagar to return to Sarah and Abraham. And we know that Sarah and Abraham probably don't treat her much better, because a few chapters from now, they throw her and her son out to basically die. But God calls her, for whatever reason, to go back. But now Hagar is willing, because she has met God, and that has made all the difference. And for me, that brownie was a symbol for me of God seeing me and caring about me. And I did end up taking the job here, And it was a difficult year as I learned a new job and things were in transition. I'm a person that likes stability, and things just naturally are unstable during transition. But I remembered that brownie, and I remembered the story of Hagar, that no matter what, God sees me, and I am not forgotten. And so I ask that question again. Have you ever felt unseen? Now, I know a lot of you are coming here with a lot of different experiences in a lot of different places, but I want to encourage you that God sees you. Have you gotten passed over for a promotion? God has seen your hard work. Are you struggling with sin? He sees your struggle, and he is with you. Have you prayed long and hard for something that hasn't happened? You are not forgotten. Are you struggling with health problems that no one else knows about? He is present in your pain. God is El Roy. He sees you. In joy and laughter, pain and sorrow, he sees you, and you are not forgotten. So God, El Roy, is the God who sees you. The second thing I think that this character trait tells us about God is that God sees the people that we don't. So in biblical stories, I think me particularly, are often tempted to only identify ourselves with the person that gets blessed, like the hero of the story, or kind of the down and out character, the underdog. But I think we're missing an opportunity for God to speak to us if we also don't look at how we might be like the oppressors or the quote-unquote villains in these biblical stories. Because as much as I only want to identify myself with Hagar in this story, I think I also see myself in Sarah and Abraham as well. I am not only the one that has felt unseen, but I also have failed to see those around me. In this story, Sarah and Abraham are God's chosen people. He has established that. But in that promise that I read earlier, God's intention is for all people to be blessed through Sarah and Abraham. And they have this woman right in front of them, their slave Hagar, and they are failing to be a blessing to her. Instead, they are acting as a curse to her. In fact, in this story, if you read it, they actually never refer to her by her name. They only refer to her by maidservant or slave woman, depending on your translation. But God, when he meets her, does say her name. He sees her, and he recognizes something that Sarah and Abraham failed to see. And God does this again and again through the biblical story. Even though this name is only used once, this theme is everywhere. We see with Gideon, God sees Gideon, but he is just a humble farmer from the weakest clan of Manasseh. He sees David, though he is the youngest of his family, and he is a shepherd, which was a dirty and overlooked job. And in John 4, Jesus sees the Samaritan woman at the well. And I encourage you, if you have time this week, to read this story in Genesis 16 and also that story in Genesis 4, or in John 4, because there are so many parallels. And this woman at the well finds herself at a well in the same way that Hagar finds herself at a spring. And the Samaritan woman is shamed by her community, but she encounters Jesus, the very personhood of God. And the Samaritan woman is invited to take of the water of life, and Hagar is blessed by God. Two stories where people that are nobodies encounter God. Now, we as the church are God's chosen people. We have been grafted into his family. Yet we too can be like Sarah and Abraham and fail to see the outsiders around us. We don't always treat those who are around us as divine image bearers. But the good news is that God does see them. He treats the outsiders with dignity and worth of those who have been given his image. And when I was trying to think of who are the outsiders in our society here in Calgary, the obvious one that came to mind are people that are experiencing homelessness in the city, and this is becoming increasingly more visible in the past few years. And I like to think of myself as a fairly nice person and someone that is like a generally good person. But when you're on the C train and there's someone that smells like alcohol and is yelling and is kind of acting sporadically, it's hard to think of that person as an image bearer, and easy just to think of them as a societal issue that needs to be solved. And I'm reminded of this particularly when I was in grade 11 here with the youth group. We went to Winnipeg and worked in a homeless shelter as our mission trip that year. And one of the things they taught us was that people experiencing homelessness often feel unseen. They feel less than human because there they are sitting on the street and people just pass them and pass them and pass them, and no one really even looks at them. And there are divided opinions on whether you should or shouldn't give money, but their encouragement was that it costs you nothing to look, smile, and say hi, to give some humanity back to them. And so being a good Christian, I was like, yes, I will do this. I will smile and say hi to every homeless person that I walk by. And so I started out doing that. But then I realized that that is actually way more uncomfortable than I expected, because sometimes I'd smile and say hi, and then they'd come up and ask for money, and then I wouldn't know what to do, and then I felt bad if I wasn't giving them money, and sometimes they would want to talk, and I wouldn't want to talk, and so I found myself gradually doing this less and less as time went on. And sometimes I even find myself, if I see someone, I kind of take a long route around so that I don't have to acknowledge them. And by doing this, I am failing to recognize God's divine image in these people that he loves, that he cares about. And I found this sentiment, this like othering of people really growing in me during COVID, because it was so easy. We were all so separated, and there was a lot of political discourse going around, and it was easy to view people as other. But I was on social media one day, and I came across a series of artwork by the artist Jessica Bond called the Foot Washing Series, and you may have seen this on social media at that time too. And what this woman has drawn is she has drawn a series of images that depict Jesus washing people's feet. And these are a variety of different people from a variety of different walks of life. And I felt this series really challenging. There are some people whose feet were being washed. I was like, yes, that's beautiful, wonderful. But then there were some people that made me kind of upset to see there, whether it be a specific politician or someone in a specific profession or someone holding a sign protesting something that I actually agreed with myself. It was hard. I was upset at the idea of Jesus showing someone I disliked or disagreed with mercy and love, because somewhere along the way I had stopped seeing these people as people and just as a political idea. And it's much easier to hate a political idea than a person. And that's probably what Sarah and Abraham thought of Hagar. She was not a person, she was just a thing. But I am thankful that we serve El Roy, that he is the one who sees even when I can't, that he is the one who got down to wash people's feet even when I wouldn't. And so as we finish today, I have collected some of Jessica Bond's foot washing series, and I'll have these up on the screen, and they'll each be up for about 15 seconds. And I want you to take some time to look at the person in the seat. Maybe you'll see yourself in that seat. And if you do, I invite you to just sit and know that God sees you. But maybe you'll see someone there that you don't like, or represent something that you don't like. And if you do, I invite you to ask God to help you show love. And then there might be people that you don't feel any strong opinions one way or another. I ask that you take that time to just pray for these people that might feel unseen, or how they represent a community of people that might feel unseen. Because God is El Roy. He is the God who sees you, and he is the God who sees them. Let me pray. Jesus, when you walked among us, you became the one rejected. You were abandoned, even betrayed by your best friends, barred from religious institutions, rejected by your very own people. You became one with suffering itself. And as an outcast, you opened the doors for us to find a home with you, a community of outsiders. You showed us exactly what you thought of such exclusion and rejection. You loved what the world devalued and demeaned. The poor, the sick, foreigners, women, those deemed unclean, the imprisoned. You flipped the who's in and who's out upside down. You radically broke every social and religious barrier, shattering them for all time. Your touch brought healing and restoration and hope to people who too felt like they didn't belong. But you didn't just bring them into the fold. You moved the center of your kingdom there with us, the left out. We know that we are not alone. Our God delights to be with us, and he has moved heaven and earth just to be where we are. Blessed are we who belong here with God and who make space for others to sit with us, who practice radical belonging and hospitality because we know what it's like to be locked out. Amen.